Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host. And with us this evening is Maria Santos, who is an immigration attorney and also a member of on the Chelmsford School Committee. And this evening, helping me out, as I have a co-host, Evelyn Thoren. So Evelyn, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Sam.
And we look forward to your participation. One of the reasons I asked Evelyn to help me with the show is that immigration, we're going to be talking about immigration and the status of immigration within the United States today. And it's a very, very complicated subject. And so I decided I needed some help. And that's why Evelyn's here. So if I fall down, she's going to pick me up. So that's what we're going to do.
I seriously doubt that you're going to fall down, Sam. But it's always nice to share the time.
Yeah, I think so.
And thank you very much, Maria, for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and it's nice to be here, right in the middle of the two of you. This is great.
Maybe we'll have to change the name of the show to Crossfire, but that may already be taken.
Boy.
I don't know.
I'm moving.
No, stay right there. So Maria, you've been on the show before. I think this might be your third time on the show. But just for the benefit of those that are viewing, could you just give us a little snapshot of your biography here, and then we'll get into the discussion.
So in this role as an attorney, I've been an attorney since 1988. My law school was Boston College Law School, and directly after passing the bar that year, I went into private practice. And at the beginning of my practice, the focus was essentially on real estate law. I had a pretty large conveyancing practice and was in one partnership here in Chelmsford and then changed to another partnership in 1996. And it's in Westford. I've been there ever since.
And the name of the firm is?
Alphen Santos.
There you go.
And I have started refocusing to immigration. Within a couple of years of being there, it became my sole focus of practice. And I tell everybody, you go into immigration practice not for the money, definitely not. And anybody will tell you that. It's an area of practice where you do it because it's in your soul. It's part of you. It's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. It's that important. And I think I think you wanted to ask me why immigration? It's part of me because I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the United States as a child. I was 9 years old. My sister was 7 with my parents who were in their 30s. And we came from the Azores, Portugal, learned the language, became assimilated. And
so you knew no English when you came here?
No English. Mm-hmm. And it was the beginning of bilingual education in Massachusetts. And by the way, I think Yale is better. That's me, my personal input on this, because my husband went through the same process, and he stayed in the system, in the bilingual program, for well over 5 years. But for me, it was a year to a year and a half.
So what's the difference between the old traditional bilingual and the new EL programs that they have?
In the bilingual program that was starting when I came in 1972, 73, essentially you learned in your own language, which is important too. And you spent very little time learning the English language. So children remained in the primary language for quite a bit of time.
So it took them longer to get the English down.
Yes, for many children. But if you had a really good foundation in your language, in your primary language, it was much easier to learn English. And I think that happened to me because I had a very good foundation in the Azores. My father worked his butt off, essentially, but he placed us in a private school. And so we were able to really learn well the Portuguese language, and so you then can transition much better.
Now, did they also learn English when they came here? Did they take classes?
I had a father who believed deeply in learning new English words every single day. He had a little book with the English words, and he would ask me at the beginning of the day, how do you say this? And then throughout the day, he would learn it and then use it. So he believed deeply in education, and the reason why we came to the United States. He believed English had to be learned and used in order to really achieve something in the country.
So did you come directly into Massachusetts when you came as a child?
We did. We came. My father had a sister. Yeah, she passed away already in Rhode Island. So we went there for a few days, and then my father had been in the United States on a work contract, and that's how he obtained his green card, his permanent status. So he had been in Lowell, working at a casket company in Nashua, New Hampshire, Batesville Casket Company. Yeah, that's what he did. And so, this is where we came. It's a great beginning. It was a hard transition about immigrants and assimilation. So that, I think, probably people think of as a very classic route of immigration. Somebody came, they got a contract for work, they were able to get a green card, then brought their family with them. So my father had already a little money accumulated, could transition us in, and we could go to school and so on. But today, over the last few years in immigration, there are many other kinds of immigration routes that have happened here. And a lot of them have been humanitarian-based instead of just the regular employment-based or family-based immigration. So when you're looking at the needs for humanitarian-based immigration, it's very different. You might receive a child in your school system who didn't have any formal education in their country. Girls from Afghanistan is a good example, where they may not have gone to school, or there may have been a great break in the education system for them, like children from Venezuela who haven't really been able to go to school continuously in the last few years because of the horrendous things that are happening in their country. Think of Haiti and what's happened there, and those folks who are coming in. So you're looking at a different need in the immigrant who is coming in, and I'm just using children and education systems. But if you think about the older immigrant who comes in that route as well, it might be very different from what happened to me and my family.
But there's an awful lot of individuals that are now coming across our border that are coming across from economic reasons. They want a job, they want to be able to make money. There's other issues within their country. So that also has changed. I have a lot of different questions. I may keep it to the other program that we do, as far as, because it's a little more political in terms of that. But it's interesting to see, how certain individuals in the country want all these people to come in for jobs, and yet we're having some other challenges with regard to that. You had also, you were on City Life, and you had told about what the current process is when they come across the border, where a lot of people have said, well, they're illegal or they're undocumented or whatever the thing is, and you said if they're processed, they aren't.
Right, so when people come across the border, they're essentially going to seek some kind of humanitarian route in immigration. So they're coming in as asylees. They're trying to prove that they can qualify for asylum in the United States. Now, the entry might be right at a port of entry, so there's an actual checkpoint, there's a processing center, which everybody in our world our immigration world is arguing are too small to handle the volume of people that we have coming in through the border. So what happens?
These are normal customs ports of entry
Exactly.
where people would normally cross if they were not in the so-called illegal status.
Right. Or if they don't cross illegally by just crossing over the border. So in between those checkpoints, there are a lot of different border points. There's a huge border without walls, some with walls, and so on, right?
And they're coming in on boats.
And they come in over the wall, through the wall, over just the land.
And just to be clear, we get those kinds of entries from the northern border too. I mean,
absolutely.
not in the degree that we get from the southern, but I think people tend to forget that this isn't just a Mexico crossing problem. It's from I mean, people fly in, okay? There's
Absolutely.
all different ways of getting into the country.
That's a very good point. And yesterday, one of my staff and I were talking this morning about this. Channel 9 News was talking about the fact the number of folks who have crossed in over the border from Canada into New Hampshire, which is a very small part, but it's very rural, and it's in the thousands. I believe the number was in the thousands. Now,
And yet you would never know that from watching the news, would you?
Right.
Except apparently if you watch Channel 9, you would know that. But that's a New Hampshire station.
and that's
Right.
and that I think is proof that immigration is a key issue right now.
Right.
Because we are getting those kinds of reports, and those are not Mexicans. What countries would you think they would be from? Many are from India.
Yes, I would think so.
Okay, from India. From other countries that we don't normally think of as are going to be crossing at border points. Now that says something too about immigration, because why would those people take a flight to Canada, enter Canada, and then cross the border to come into the United States?
Now, here's the question. Back up a minute. Are they in Canada legally? Do we know?
They entered Canada somehow.
Okay.
Now, some of the people who then come and see me because they've married an American citizen and they want to get a green card that way, and their entry was without authorization over the border from Canada.
Okay.
Many times they have a visa to enter Canada and then cross over
Okay.
through Buffalo or through some part of another state.
Buffalo's a big port of
A
entry.
big port of entry. So yes, we have crossings at other points other than the southern border, no question. But there have been a lot of entries. So in between the checkpoints, people enter, they just cross over. And then Customs and Border Patrol holds them.
If they can
Okay.
catch them.
Right. So they didn't go into a checkpoint to declare asylum. Instead, they caught them, or they wanted to be caught by entering through the other points.
Just to get over the border.
Right. So it's just at a different time they're going to request asylum and seek asylum. Now, when they actually go through the asylum process, which could be an asylum hearing years from the time that they enter through that port of entry, because that is our system that we have in place, they will be in a different part of the United States. They will have lived here for quite a bit of time. If they follow the process correctly, they probably have work authorization that they've gotten along the way, and they kept on making sure that was renewed, so they've been working here in the United States, but it's going to be years later before they actually go through a hearing. There's going to be a tremendous percentage of denials for asylum. So then it gets reviewed through the immigration court. This is the blockage or the amount of cases. There are millions of cases.
And we've just established a new court venue, haven't we, locally here?
Yes, Chelmsford is the venue now for an immigration court. And the only other one is at the John F. K. Building in Boston, in Massachusetts, for a court. Okay? So and we've hired some more judges, but still not enough. So immigration court and proceedings in an immigration court is another way to get to a point of having permanent residency.
So if you have a case currently, you go to Boston. When that court in Chelmsford is established,
It already is.
Okay, do you have a choice of where you can go because of the proximity of the practice?
So that's the whole question. Right now, they're trying to decide which venue it's going to be and where the jurisdiction will be and so on. It's not yet firm.
Okay, and this is all run by the federal government.
This is all run by the
So
federal
if you were
government,
recommending
Department of
lawyers and people that might want to be judges, you'd say go into immigration law because they're going to need to hire a whole lot more people?
You actually don't even have to be an immigration lawyer or know much about immigration. You can apply to be an immigration judge. And one of the other huge problems in immigration is the fact that we do not have independent courts. We have a court system that's basically run by the executive branch. And what essentially means here is that whenever you have a lawsuit against the government in immigration, it's going to be against our Attorney General, because the Attorney General's office has the power over the court system in immigration now. It's going to be always linked to the executive government. You will hear, I don't do a lot of immigration court work myself, but any of my friends, colleagues who talk about when they go in, they will often see the judge is a former prosecutor in, the system. So it's not really an independent system of justice in the immigration courts. And so that's another thing that needs to
So
be
I can
overhauled.
write Governor Healy a letter and recommend that she appoint you to the court.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
I think you would make a fine judge.
Oh,
Thank
yes,
you. I
agree.
appreciate that,
Because
but
at least
I-
you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And you've studied it. Where, from what you're saying, if you're friends with the Attorney General and you need a job, then you can say, oh, gee, I'd like to do this. And that's unfortunate, and that's political. And when you do that, then whatever those policies are of the Attorney General will filter down into the courts, regardless of whether or not it's right or wrong according to the law that's established.
It's a serious issue for us every time that we have a change in the office of the executive, that's the president, we are going to have new policies in immigration, period. Now, I understand that because this is a federal system. And actually, if I was going to recommend any big change in immigration, it would be I think it should be a stronger federal system in immigration, because it impacts not only each state and what's happening at each state level, but immigration is also about our relationship with other nations. So, for example, what's happening with Mexico and the border of Mexico. The Texas law that we've heard about in the news and so on, enforcing that law, what are they going to do? They're going to take an individual and just return them over the border?
So they're trying to enforce federal law.
Exactly, at a state level. And that causes a lot of problems. For example, forum shopping by people who are not here in status. So if you want a driver's license right now, and you don't have immigration status, we have that available in Massachusetts. I personally think it's important to make it available because it's about the safety in the roads. It really is. And you want to have insured drivers.
Oh, I agree with you. Yep.
And it causes a lot less havoc in our registry of motor vehicles.
Right, because if we're going to have them here, we want to make sure, or try to ensure, that the safety of the citizens should be primary, and that's part of it. Because I've read different interviews with some people that have gotten those licenses, saying now they don't feel like, they're always tense about things, and sometimes if you are, you're not always thinking.
Don't make them more of a lawbreaker by denying them access. I mean, to me,
They have jobs, they have to go someplace.
exactly. I mean, it makes perfect sense that they should have the driver's license. I know that was a big political argument, but
Yes.
it made no sense to me not to give these folks driver's licenses.
So now we're talking here, we've hit on another part of immigration that is very political. And it is totally okay, Evelyn, I like politics, okay? To an extent, if we are a bit political, it's all right. So, undocumented individuals in the United States. I don't call them illegals because nobody is an illegal, but they are undocumented. That means they entered somehow. They either came in, they might have taken a plane, they might have overstayed a visa term, which was really a right to stay about 6 months when you come as a visitor. They might have overstayed a waiver entry, which means people who came in without a visa, but their countries have an reciprocity with the United States, and so they're able to enter for 90 days as visitors, and they overstayed that. Or they entered through the border, and they have stayed. All of those folks right now number in the millions. Now, the last estimates that I had heard was around 12 million. I think probably now it's much higher. over the last couple of years, 3 years, there's been a lot of more entries since COVID. And so, you know, what are we going to do with those folks? You hit on something really important, I think, when you said, and Evelyn too, if they don't have that driver's license, it forces them to do things that are not legal. And it happens in many other things too. They go underground in a way to run their lives. And that's not okay. But another thing you said, they have jobs. That became so evident during COVID. That really, really did for me. I would go to a store, and the folks that I saw working there were the undocumented. They were working the jobs that, you know, other folks didn't really want to do at that point.
Because of COVID. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
it just became really evident. We could see it clearly.
Yeah.
They weren't going to get any benefits. They didn't have a right to any kind of payments because they were undocumented.
Right.
So that, and in fact, many left Massachusetts and went to work in southern states that remained open because the workers were necessary.
Okay,
But
that makes sense.
I don't know anyone who is undocumented who doesn't have a job. That's a sad thing for me to say, because you should have work authorization. That's the law in order to have a job.
Well,
What does that say about the employer?
The employer probably didn't ask. The employer very likely turned an eye when the documents that were provided for I-9 purposes looked okay. They looked fine.
Did the law
That's all they
change?
asked.
Did they change the law? Because decades ago, there were different ones that might hire a nanny and they didn't have the right documentation or the visa or whatever it was, that, or the waiver or whatever
They
it
weren't
was.
paying Social Security.
And when they
Right.
did that, then the person that hired them got into serious legal issues. Are they still doing that?
Is there any enforcement against employers?
In other words,
Is
the law
what
still
you're asking, I
states, but
think.
there's no enforcement.
There isn't. There's never going to be enough policing. There aren't enough police.
Only
for
when
15 million or 13 million
only
people.
when somebody drops a dime, and again, where they get you always is financial. It's when people don't. You hire somebody, and somebody finds out that a person is working, and then they check, and there's no record in the Social Security Administration. That's how they find out. Okay.
Right. And
You know, they got Al Capone for tax evasion, right? So
We
it always
actually-
boils down to something financial. That's where they'll get you.
I think we actually have a very good program in the United States for verification of work authorization. It's called E-Verify. And in some states, it was required, and the federal government required, if you were going to get federal contracts or state contracts, you had to be an E-Verify employer. But not all employers have to be E-Verify. It's not mandated by the government. Now, if you are an E-Verify employer, you must go through the system first before anyone comes on board to make sure that the work authorization is there. And if that's mandated, maybe it'll be a part of a mandate if we ever have an overhaul of the system. It might be something that
Yeah, the mechanism is there. I mean, in my past corporate life, I managed the HB1 program because we had a lot of and actually a lot of these folks were based overseas. They weren't based here in the United States, but we had a combination. And part of my job was to
So you did L1s as well?
Yes,
Your company
yes.
transfers.
And I had to look at these people, and I had to vet them against the various sanctions list and things like that to make sure that, you know,
That you didn't need special licensing or anything.
I had to. There were 5 or 6 employees I actually had to get export licenses for because of the transfer of information.
Absolutely.
You know,
They still do.
Yeah, and that's a. Most people, that's a very technical area that unless you work in it, you probably wouldn't understand it. But I found in 5 years, I only found one person that didn't belong in the country that was actually on a watch list. Okay, but that's why you have it. So he was on the SDN list, the special Treasury list, and designated terrorist. Okay.
Wow.
That was one person. I mean, I probably looked at maybe 4,000 people over 5 years. So we won
But it's wonderful that the list existed and that you were able
18,000 people.
to
3 different lists that we had to look at.
to pinpoint.
Right.
So I think that's another component of immigration, and mostly what I do, which is employment-based immigration. Now, people often say to me, how did you end up being an employment-based immigration attorney out of Westford, Mass? It doesn't matter where the employer is. I've been dealing with some of my employers were very large employers who had a lot of engineering needs and so on. And so at one point I actually would go in-house into an employer and spend several of my hours there because they had so many people who were H-1Bs, needed green cards to be processed and so on. So employment-based immigration means that you come in with a job offer. So somebody has extended a job offer, an employer, and you're going to need a processing of a visa in order to come in with that authorization.
Yeah, you're matching people up, which is what I think the intent was to begin with, because that's a legal way of actually living in this country. But we don't always see that.
Right.
Let's say we hardly ever see it right now because of the magnitude of the number of individuals that are coming in. That's why you said it overwhelms the system.
It does overwhelm the system, and it makes it so that it's very difficult for folks to really understand that the legal pathways to immigration are not enough, are not sufficient in the country today to meet the needs of our country. At least this is what I've seen.
I would argue, let's go back 10 years. I would argue that 10 years ago that was the case without all of the increased influx. The system wasn't able to accommodate it 10 years ago. Is that a...
When it was under more control than it is now.
Exactly. Is that a fair statement?
It's more controlled.
I mean, it certainly wasn't as bad back then, but in my opinion, it was still broken. I think it's been broken for 30 or 40 years.
That's correct. 1990 was the last time that we had any kind of reform that impacted anything.
Right.
Okay? And since then, it's just continuously
Gotten worse.
backlogged and more backlogs. So, do you want to talk more a little bit about the legal pathways in?
Well, I think we're going to do that. We're almost out of time in our first half hour, so
time
we're going
flies.
to do that in our second segment, which is another reason why I asked Evelyn here, because at my age, I don't know if I can do a whole hour by myself.
Oh, gee. See,
with-
you almost did 2 hours.
But with you, it's easy.
You can do
okay,
it.
with
You
you,
can do it,
with you,
Sam.
it's easy. So.
You get an Evelyn can too.
But, we have, again, for the benefit of those watching, if you're just tuning in, we have Maria Santos with us, and Maria is an experienced immigration attorney. She's been in practice for well over 30 years. It's Alphen Santos out of Westford,
Yesterday.
Yep.
and we're having a nice conversation. And in the second segment, we're going to get into, I think, some more of the history of the immigration system, where we think the faults are, what some of the solutions might be going forward, and that will necessarily involve, I think, getting into a little bit of the politics. And you said that you weren't afraid to do that.
No, I don't mind talking about politics.
Well, as an elected official here in Chelmsford on the school committee, you shouldn't be afraid of that.
No, I'm not afraid of it, but I think that the way I approach politics is it's a service. It needs to address the needs of people. And it's the same thing with immigration. Immigration exists because people have to move around. In the old days,
For one reason or another.
for one reason
Right,
or another.
exactly.
And countries need to set rules and establish laws of who can come to their country and who can't come to their country. And we, unfortunately, have not kept up with the times of what's happening in the world in our immigration laws, and it's causing so many issues.
And we are going to talk about that in our next segment. We are out of time, so stay tuned, folks, for part 2 of Maria Santos and Company. Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening for part 2 in a 2-part series on immigration is immigration attorney Maria Santos. Maria, thank you for being with us. And also with us this evening is co-host Evelyn Thoren. So since we have a very intense subject here, I decided I needed some help. So we called in the troops here. So that's why we have Evelyn. So in the last segment, we went over some of the very high-level basics of immigration and what some of the terms mean and so forth. But I think in this section, segment here, we probably want to focus a little bit more on the process, what happens after people get here, naturalization and things of that nature. So we'll just we'll just go with that.
So first, thank you so much for doing this and for going through a subject that's dear to my heart. Now, folks enter the United States various ways, and we talked about that in the last segment. And by the time they get to a green card process, that's permanent residency, they will have entered somehow and gotten to the point of getting that green card. All right, so those 12 million undocumented, those folks who are here on humanitarian parole
so that's,
or asylum.
So that's pretty much of an estimate. So at this point in time, we think approximately 12 million people
undocumented
are in the country in an undocumented state. And I'm glad you said that. And I want to just take 1 second and explain the use of the term undocumented to people, because I think that's important. Undocumented, I think, is probably, and this is just my opinion now, is probably the most precise term that you can use to describe the status of these people. I mean, we say illegal immigrants and we have other terms and so forth, but the term undocumented to me really describes what the situation is. The person is here without authorization.
Right.
I.e. undocumented.
Right.
Okay, so is that a fair statement? And I think that's probably why that term was adopted.
Yes.
Because it is, in my view anyway, it is the most descriptive term to describe what that status is.
So if a person enters and does not go to a point of inspection at some point, okay, that's an immigration officer at the point of inspection. If they came in on a flight, if they came in through a ship, any point of entry like that, even through a border, with an inspection point, they will receive what's called an I-94 card, which these days is done electronically. And that says, okay, you can be here in the United States in this particular status for this amount of time.
Right, and then they're giving a court date at that point?
Well, there's no court date if they did it legally.
This is a different situation.
If they
okay,
did
we're
it
describing a legal entry here. All right,
So this isn't the current situation that we have.
This is not border entries or anything like that.
This is how
so those folks, the undocumented, would be the ones who may have entered through the border without seeing an
going through
officer
that
or
process.
anything.
Right.
No inspection, no being caught, no referred to court for a later hearing. They just entered the United States or overstayed on an initial legal entry. All right? So let me give you an example of how someone then gets to a green card. Okay, you came in 5 years ago and you are from Brazil and you came as a visitor. The officer gave you 6 months. You have a visa for I'll say 5 years, but the officer at the point of entry at the airport, the immigration officer says you can stay here 6 months as a visitor.
Now, is that in any way discretionary on the part of the officer, or is that a mandated?
It's standard.
Just about everybody who's coming in as a visitor, the maximum they get at the first entry is 6 months.
Okay, all right.
If you come in and you say that you're here for business purposes as a visitor, you're coming for meetings, a conference, whatever it is, usually it's probably going to be 3 months. So there are different purposes for visitor, but mostly people come in that way and then they overstay. So this person, when she came in, decided after the 6 months she was just not going to leave the United States. She's gotten jobs in between. In fact, she set up her own cleaning company, and she's been doing a lot of house cleanings, getting paid that way. She's reporting the income to the government using a TIN number, tax identification number, and she meets the love of her life. He's an American citizen. Okay? I do get it, quite a few marriage cases. They have now known each other for 2 years. They married, and they came to see me. The first thing I look for is that legal entry. If you've got it, there is a section of the immigration law that allows you to adjust status in the United States and become a green card holder through marriage. If the marriage has not existed for more than 2 years, 2 years or more, then it's going to be a temporary green card called conditional for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, the couple is going to file another process to get a permanent green card because they have been in a marital state for all of the years that the person was a conditional green card holder. Okay?
Right.
So that's a way to become a green card holder, even though you overstayed, so through marriage, to a U.S. citizen. Okay. Now, after 3 years of having been married to that U.S. citizen and having a green card, either conditional or permanent, that woman can apply to become a U.S. citizen. That's called naturalization. All right? And in order to become naturalized, she will have to show several things. First, she doesn't have crimes of moral turpitude. She's been checked one time on crimes already because when she became a green card holder, her biometrics were done and she was checked already. If in between anything happened and she had a run-in with the law, that's a felony, it's going to be a problem. That's a misdemeanor or that's serious. There are levels of crime that do not allow you to then become a naturalized citizen. Okay, and you might be put into deportation. So you have to be very careful, and that's one of the things I always check with a person, any run-ins with the law. In addition, you have to make sure that if it was a male and they were here between certain ages, that they did register with the Selective Service.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
And you also want to make sure the individual's been filing their taxes and being generally a good person in our government system, in our established systems.
On occasion, you do get articles that come across as far as those that have been in the military, but not a naturalized citizen. And then that now they're trying to apply to become a citizen, and they haven't had the discharge yet, but everything was fine with regard to their service. But they want to be able to stay. So there are cases like that. Some of that, like I said, some of those articles that I read.
So there are exceptions for folks who have served in the military, but there's people trying to get it so that if you have served in the military and you are to get into the military undocumented is going to be difficult in the first place. Right. So I don't know what their status was and so on, but there are exceptions for folks who served in the military. So this lady then says, okay, I want to apply, I'm fine, and we apply for naturalization. The fee is almost $1,000 to apply for naturalization.
And that's apart from any legal fees that they're paying.
Apart, if they want to.
That's just the fee to apply.
Do naturalization on their own. They will file the petition, which is an N-400, and they don't have issues that they need to discuss with an attorney, or don't feel they do, and then they apply. All right. Then they go to biometrics again, and they study civics. And if you are interested in what the questions are and so on that you study, just go to uscis.gov, put in naturalization questions, and there's like 100 civic questions. And the person studies that, gets an interview notice. Usually in our district of the Boston office, it's going to be within 3 to 6 months. They want to make sure the naturalization interview is done within that period. And at the interview, tested on the civics, tested on the ability to speak and write basic English, and then is questioned on all of the N400 questions. Multi-page, I think now it's over 26 pages long. A question, it's been put in there for everything, okay, that you could possibly do wrong in the world.
How many naturalized citizens would pass that test?
Well, yeah, you
I
can see
hope-
that.
You mean just born in the United
Exactly.
States? Born here.
Or even the seniors that are going to graduate.
Right.
How much do they know?
If you have a person who has been naturalized in the United States, they have been vetted
Exactly.
in our system many times. First, to get that green card. Possibly even before that, to get the visa at a consulate. And then the green card, and then the naturalization.
Maybe we should change the law that only naturalized citizens can run for political office. We'd get a better class of politician, it would
You
seem to
can't do
me.
that as far
Not
as
going to
president,
go
'cause
there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
You'd
go
have to
there.
change some other laws way, a lot
Because
higher.
there's people, even with my last name, Santos, we're not going to go there. Okay. So I think many people often say to me, oh, I'm calling because I want this person to become a citizen. There are going to be years between the entry, the green card, and becoming a citizen. Several years. So I just gave the example of through marriage. Now let's do another process. Let's say it was work-based immigration, okay? The individual came in as a student and studied at UMass Lowell, has a master's degree in electronics engineering, and has finished their degree, has done what they call OPT, optional practical training, for 1 year. Because it's a STEM field, was able to get 2 additional years under STEM OPT of work authorization. So has now been with the same employer post-school, post-graduation, for 3 years. I'm going to say it's year number 2 of that, and the employer registered the individual for an H-1B,
Okay.
was able to
I'm familiar with this process.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to give a little quick synopsis of that. The H-1B lottery, quote unquote, registration system is done every year, end of March, first week of April. Over 600 to 700,000 applications for registrations are usually entered, and there are 85,000 spots available. 20,000 of which must go to master's degree grads from the United States. Okay? So if your degree is not from the United States and you didn't complete a year, you cannot even enter that part of the lottery. All right, so the numbers are expired, gone, as of April 1 for a start date of October 1. This person was fortunate. They got selected, they're an H-1B.
Now, can the people that got rejected, or when they cut it off at the 85,000, can then they apply again?
If they still have remainder time on their STEM OPT
Okay, so they still have a chance.
continue to work.
But what happens to them if they don't?
All right, so then here's my options. Lately, I've been doing this so much for scientists because now we're not as much needing, well, we still need them, but the engineering field is more established. Science has been more what we have been working on lately, bringing in individuals. So if they don't have time left on STEM OPT and they want to stay in the United States and they have no other route except through this, they're either going to have to go back to school to get another degree. And during that degree, while they're pursuing it, they may have what's called curricular practical training, which means that some of the time is spent at the employer and some of the time is spent in the classroom.
Right, because my question would be is how are they financing their degree?
Yeah. So they're at all foreign students have to finance their own education. So you can't get an F1 visa to be a student unless you show that you have the money to pay the fees for the degree. So the visa will not be issued to you. All right, so the other possibility might be in the science field that you qualify for. No, you're outstanding in your field. That's very hard for students who who just finished their degree because they may not have enough publications, have done enough presentations, whatever, in the research field, those type of things, or might not be outstanding. So we look for alternatives. There are also companies set up that will hire you. They are set up with universities. So they find these H-1Bs who did not, potential H-1Bs who did not get selected in the CAP. CAP is for for-profit employers, not for nonprofits affiliated with universities. So these companies get set up where they will hire that individual to work 5, 10 hours a month or a week or whatever for a university. And then you can get what's called a concurrent H-1B with a for-profit company. So there have been ways figured out. This all costs money to do. But there have been ways put into the system to try to keep these individuals in the United States because there are not enough H-1B visas available each year for the number of people who want to stay and can't stay and are needed in our system.
Right, and whether, I don't know if anyone in the audience is aware, you told us at prior interviews that there's quotas that are based upon the countries that in the world.
So here
so
I
we
come.
only have so many people that can come from China, so many people that can come from India, and,
Yes.
and so forth. And in some cases, when we've had the discussion about people that how many Chinese are coming in, there is some challenges
Yes.
economically within that country, and everybody thinks that there's different conspiracies, which there may be, but when you take a look at the bigger picture without looking at the conspiracy part, then you understand why they're all trying to get here.
Well, okay, so let's make my example a person from India, okay, with a master's degree now, is an H-1B, and now is in the company. The company loves this individual's work, and they say, oh, we want to sponsor him for a green card, permanent residency. And I say, oh, from India. Okay, let me look at this. I go to the visa bulletin. The visa bulletin shows me that if we apply in the master's EB2 type of category from India, the wait time might be 8 to 10 years for a visa to be made available for a green card or permanent residency in the United States.
And the guy's already here.
He's here and he has to remain
Yeah.
an H-1B during that time because he's going to continue working and needs legal status in the United States.
And there's no problem normally for extending the H-1B visa.
Except that you only have 6 years as an H-1B.
Okay, so there's a limit of 6 years.
Right.
All
But if you have filed for permanent residency and you're in the second stage of that 3-stage process of a green card called an I-140 stage, or you've gotten an approval to get that permanent visa, this buys you more time on the H-1B.
Okay.
You can extend out in unlimited increments in 3 years. You still have to have an employer sponsor, okay? And it also, if you have a spouse who is from India as well, possibly, who needs work authorization, that spouse who was an H-4, a dependent of the H-1B, can now apply for work authorization.
Now, one of the things that you're doing, which is of great importance, but we're limited with time.
I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, no. We could do 2 hours and you have
Exactly.
4 segments,
Yep.
which is a consideration, but maybe not for this evening. But the problem is, to me, isn't the fact that you have a legal way of doing it. Okay, it's what's currently happening in this country. You had, I think it was the state of Michigan, maybe it was Illinois, that was saying, well, all these people that are here, we need to get them work authorizations. And they're not necessarily going to go through the proper channels because of the timeline and the lack of employees or qualified individuals to be able to do that. So they'll blanket that. And the question well, there's a lot of questions, but one of them, you talked about having a background check. Are they doing background checks on all these individuals? Then you have, I'm just trying to get, because it all runs together. Then you have the ones that are committing felonies and misdemeanors, and they're not even in the judicial system, they're just letting them back out on the street to do it again. If they choose to apply for anything, will that pop up under their name, or will they give a different alias or another name?
So you bring up something really important, which is that if you are in the system, in the legal system of immigration, you are going to be vetted. There will be biometrics done.
No, I understand that part.
Okay,
It's-
but if you're not, and you walked over the border, and you go up to, name any restaurant, and you apply for a job, and you get a job because you created some kind of documentation, you bought it for a few bucks, and it's just false documentation, but the person who verified the I-9, it looks real, so they took you in, there's been no vetting there.
Well, I understand that because you can see that in terms of the articles, whether they're from CNN, whether they're Fox, whether it's NPR, The Hill, Political, it doesn't really matter. They all are pretty much giving the same type of information. They have a slant to it, but the basic facts of what is occurring is they want to get the individuals that are currently being paid for with tax money and in shelters that we're not even housing our own homeless and veterans. So they want those people to get jobs because that's apparently why they came here. So they may blanket that, just like you have, again, politically, you have individuals that just want to say, oh, we're going to make them all citizens by an executive order. And everybody's going, what are you talking about?
Well, right, because I think people just don't understand. So the individuals you're talking about getting quick work authorization have been folks who have come in as under TPS, temporary protected status, might be Haitian, might be Venezuelan, or they came in seeking asylum through the border, we're at a checkpoint. So they came in. Within 90 days, everybody would love them to have their work authorization. They'd love them to have them from day one so they can go and apply for work. Massachusetts had the same problem. And a bunch of attorneys got together and we were able to create clinics where people did get their work authorization very quickly so that they could get jobs.
Legally.
Legally, and the jobs are available. People will tell me, I need folks for my restaurant. I can't have the number of hours offered anymore for service because I don't have enough workers. Or they'll tell me, I need folks at the grocery store, and I don't have enough workers showing up and applying for work. Those types of things are happening. Construction is another big area. Hospitality is always a big area where there are not sufficient number of workers and people need those workers.
Well, I've also seen firsthand, my mother's in an assisted living facility.
Perfect.
She will be 103 on Saturday. And there's a turnover of quite a number of individuals that are there. Sometimes the group that you see may be from Brazil. They may be from the Philippines.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of...
Name some African countries. There are quite a few.
Well, Nigeria.
Absolutely.
But the people that are in the authoritative positions that are coming from those countries, I don't know if they're citizens or they're not, but they are qualified.
The majority have come in under temporary protected status. There's been quite a, so there are quite a few designated countries for temporary, and I've got the list here. You can look at uscis.gov anytime, and you just type in temporary protected status countries, and you'll get it. So Afghanistan, Burma, now Myanmar, Cameroon, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, and Ukraine.
Those are all
all designated temporary protected status.
They're very volatile countries. A lot of them are on lists, sanction lists, right?
And that's why. That's why that these individuals have that status and can get work authorization as long as they continue to get the redesignation. Those are not undocumented individuals.
So we make the assumption, just for the sake of discussion, we make the assumption that if you're coming in from Haiti, you're probably an asylum seeker.
Or you're,
right?
Yep.
because of the conditions in your country. Okay,
Well, there are some things that are obvious
right.
to anybody that's paying attention to
hope
what's
so.
going on in the news. But then there's other countries that don't make that list, and there's an awful lot of people coming in from those countries
That's
also.
right.
So they're not recognized as such,
Right.
even though there may be some conditions under which they left that could qualify them for to be asylum seekers. But that's on an individual basis. And when you have 12 million people that are here, that overwhelms this. It would overwhelm any system for it to be able to do anything legally. You know, you're in a position where you're trying to make sure everything, all your ducks are in a row. You know,
Right.
abide by the laws, do what needs
That's
to be
my
done,
goal.
help the individuals. Now, you said that you had a mission before you actually retire.
Oh, I have a hope.
What is that mission?
Hope is eternal. Hope is eternal. Everybody always, you know, I've been an attorney a long time. I became an attorney Reagan administration. Time of IRA, which is in immigration meant you're here overstayed for 3 years, 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. You're not going to return to the United States for quite a bit of time if you leave the United States. So people stayed. They didn't leave, and they're still undocumented. All right?
Right.
I have not been able to offer people help that come and see me, and I can only offer what's available. I am hoping that we do have an overhaul of the immigration system so that we can see people re-enter the regular system of government, workforce, and so on. To me, that is so important. You know why? Because I think now I'm also going to be somebody who is looking out for all of us, which is national security. Our national security depends on having systems that work.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Including individuals who are correctly contributing to our social security system so that we can take out from our social security system.
Well, I'm
That
certainly
will
sure.
be part of what needs to be fixed.
Right, but I'm positive by everything that you've said that is one of the goals that you have, is to help as many people as possible, make sure that they are an asset to the society rather than a burden to the society. But
And recognized.
right, but there's, like I said, there's so many people that are overwhelming the system because there's no controls on it, which there can be. But they're choosing not to. And when you talk about national security, you have the FBI director say it's only a matter of time when we have a terrorist attack because of how many people that they have not caught coming across the border. You talk about the vetting part, you know, you have the electronic part where, and as you had said, Sam, that when you did, vetting with individuals, you come across on occasion, a felony that somebody's not reporting, or it's something maybe they actually forgot because it was so long ago, and everything has been, lovely and wonderful. But I think that our national security, it isn't just the job aspect, but that national security piece is something that sometimes will keep me awake at night thinking about that.
It's economics, it's security in terms of potential crime and having folks here. Although there are so many studies that show that immigrants really are a much smaller percentage of the criminals in the United States than people who were born in the United States. But if you'd have to look at all the studies and everything.
Yeah, on the basis of numbers, I would
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Probably.
Yeah.
So, so I think for me it is. It's part of our security. We need to really think about it. And I'm a baby boomer. I'm the end of the baby boomers. We are retiring out. We need.
Oh, you
young
think you
folks.
are?
You can't retire yet.
gonna say,
Your
you
job
are
is
going to
not done.
retire.
Immigration overhaul.
So we are 20 seconds away from sign off, and Evelyn is right. We could do another 2 hours.
It was so much fun.
And we
I
will.
wanna thank you.
We will at some point.
Yeah,
Thank you
we'll try
very
to
much.
schedule you again, and then we'll cover the things that obviously we didn't cover.